Hi, this is Alan Gassman. It's Tuesday, October 8th, 2019, and I'm here today to talk to you with my friend and a mentor, Srikumar Rao. Professor Rao is renowned for his books, Are You Ready to Succeed and Happiness at Work, and for his programs which teach people how to think a little bit differently. Very, very good for professionals, actually good for all human beings. So I'm welcoming Srikumar. Please keep in mind, however, don't forget Thursday, October 10th, on the front line with Jonathan Blotmacher, what America's #1 estate planner is thinking. Please don't miss that program. Also, on Tuesday, John Beck of our office is going to present a 30-minute talk on economic recovery zones. He's going to go over the basics and then also a lot of little quirky things that you need to know about if you're going to get involved in this area. And my friend David Finkel is joining me on October 17th with 5 simple, easy ways to increase professional profit by $50,000 or more. And then finally, my partner, Christopher DiNicolo, is going to talk about Florida revocable trust, whether you should do separate trusts, joint trusts, or the gest, what is best. So now I'm going to introduce to you Srikumar Rao. This is going to be an interview conversation. There's not going to be any slides. We're going to get straight to the point. Professor Rao, welcome.
My pleasure, Alan.
So, Professor Rao, we've spoken before, and I think a lot of people who are on this program have heard you before. And we wanted to talk today about the human response to pressures that we all get to be better professionals, and quite honestly, to make more money, to be more popular, and to have more free time. And those things are all in conflict with each other, because the more we work, the less free time we have, and our concepts about money and our concepts about professionalism are all blurred by high goals and, as you would call, mental chatter. So how can you help us with that? And how do you reframe what our response should be to these types of pressures and objectives?
Okay, first of all, Alan, if I may, I would like to flat out contradict something you said. And what you said is that these are all in conflict with each other. And I'm going to postulate to you that no, they are not in conflict with each other. Let me explain what I mean. The persons on this call are very darn good. They're not just darn good, they're probably some of the very best at doing what they do. But like all successful professionals, there is in the back of their minds and in their lives an undercurrent of tension and maybe a little bit of anxiety. You know, I would like to grow my business. I would like to be increasing revenues, making more money. I would like to have more leisure time to spend with my family and do things like learning Chinese that I always wanted to do, but I never had enough time to do that. And darn it, I want to feel happier. You know, I'm feeling too stressed out. And somehow or other in our heads, we've got these are in conflict with each other. If I want to make more money, I have to work harder, which means longer hours, which means less time with my family, which means that I'm not going to be ever able to learn Chinese. And that's just the way it is. Actually, Alan, that's flat out wrong. What I do in my programs is I help you make a quantum leap in your personal life and your professional life. So you can't make a quantum leap by working harder. In fact, working harder will probably set you back. You cannot make a quantum leap by working smarter. That's the illusion we have. You know, I've got to do all of that, but I've just got to do it smarter. Doesn't work. You can't do it by managing your time better, which is what most of us think we should do. When we manage our time better, we can get more things done. I'm here to suggest that the way you make a quantum leap in your life is not by working harder, not by working smarter, not by managing your time better, but by learning to think differently, think radically differently. Now, the notion of thinking differently, by the way, is something that all of us are familiar with. Not only are we familiar with it, but we buy into the idea. We all know, for example, that we should see the glass as half full rather than as half empty. We all know that every problem is an opportunity in disguise, that the darkest hour is before the dawn. So yes, we're familiar with the notion of thinking differently and we embrace the concept. But despite that, the vast majority of us have great difficulty in actually consistently thinking differently. And that's because most of us try to think differently by trying to think differently, and it doesn't work. The only way you can consistently think differently is by examining the mental models you hold that force you to seeing the world a particular way and making changes in them. And as you make changes in multiple mental models that you hold so closely, you literally become a different person. And as you become a different person, you don't have to give thought to thinking differently, it happens automatically. And not only does it happen automatically, but the results in your life are almost like magic. For example, I take it for granted that everybody wants to make more money. And the common thinking is if you want to make more money, you have to visualize it in great detail and you have to go off and think about making more money. And I'm suggesting that's dead wrong. The way to make more money is not to think about making more money, and especially not to want to have more money. The way to do it is to allow more money to flow into your life. You don't force it or try to force it to come. You allow it to come, and you allow it to come by building a particular model of what you're here on earth to do and how you can be a service. These are the kinds of things that I go into in great detail in my program. You want to have more leisure, and the way to have more leisure is not to say, well, I've got to do it, I've got to cut off things. The way to have more leisure is to find out what it is that really turns you on, focus exclusively on that, and farm everything else out to somebody else. Stuff does have to be done, it does not have to be done by you. So there are many such methods, tools, techniques that I have evolved over the years. These have been tested in extremely tough environments like major business schools, major corporations, entrepreneurial organizations like YPO, EO, Wistage, and they absolutely work. So now your court, Alan. What questions do you have, or what do you think I ought to share?
Well, what's a good example of a mental model where you've seen someone in a profession? We get this ceiling of complexity that we're always pushing up. The more things that we enhance, the more success that we find, the more pressures we find ourselves in. What would be an example of a mental model that somebody following your protocols might change to?
Oh, all right. I'll get. There are several, but let me pick one example. Very often, for example, and particularly when I'm dealing with business persons, and these could be entrepreneurs and many professional service producers like yourself, for example, are also entrepreneurs. So something really bad happens, like say, for example, you lose a major client and you immediately say, oh my God, this is really terrible. I lost a client. What's going to happen to me? And I invite persons who take my program to think about whenever an event happens, any event, it doesn't cause suffering. Suffering begins at the instant that you label this event, this is bad, this is terrible, I cannot bear it, it's going to do nasty things to my business. Now, I invite, Alan, persons to think about, did anything happen in your life in the past that at the time it happened you thought was terrible? But now you can look back upon it and say, hey, that wasn't terrible at all. Or, maybe it was even a good thing. And everybody can, multiple examples. So if something happened in the past in your life, which at the time it happened you thought was terrible, but you can now look back upon it and say that was actually pretty good. Is it barely possible that what you're today about to label bad, like losing a big client, could in X years turn out to be pretty good? Just pausing to ask yourself that question moves you to a different emotional domain. And if you then take the next step and say, what is it that I can proactively do to actually make this a good thing? And all of a sudden you moved from the realm of despair to the realm of possibility. And you will find that you're no longer faced by anything. That's how you learn to be extremely resilient. This is one of the things that persons who have taken my program say they found the most helpful. Something happens, and before they start beating themselves up, before they start bemoaning it, they just say, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And you'll be surprised at the number of, quote, bad things that happen that are either good things or can be easily converted to good things. That's just an example, Alan.
Tell us a little bit about your approach to what you call a toxic person. Because
A
as an
toxic person?
a toxic person, because as you know, as an estate planner, I have to work with a lot of different people. Some of
Mhm.
them are happy, some of them are unhappy, some of them, quite honestly, are difficult to like. They're
Mhm.
difficult to endure. We have the same issues. Sometimes we work with colleagues who are more difficult than others to work with.
Mhm.
I found after taking your program that I'm able to have a much more positive experience and a much more positive relationship with a lot of people who other people believe are very negative. And how is that happening as a result of the time I've spent with you?
There are several reasons for that, Alan. One is the internal transformation that happens, and the second is the way in which you view that. Let me give you an example, and this is a dramatic example, but it illustrates what I have in mind. So there was one of my students. She was at London Business School, and she got a job in the city of London with one of these zillionaires who was running a hedge fund. And he had a habit of, whenever he was angry at someone, he would thrust his face into the face of the person he was angry at and shout. And he was very profane and quite rude. And he would shout at the top of his voice, and his face would get red, and bits of spit would fly out and land anywhere. And just a horrible experience to be in the receiving end for. And my student told me, Professor Rao, you have no idea how bad this is, and I am not going to stand it anymore. The moment my bonus check clears, I'm out of here. So I told her, yes, you can do that if you like, but you have spent a lot of time at the company and you're going to be chucking all that experience away. Do you really want to do that? She said, what's the alternative? I can't deal with this person. So I told her a story. When my kids were younger, we had gone to Disney World and we were in line, and there was a man close to us who had a young son, must have been 7 or 8 years old, and he was holding him tight. And the son bawled, so he let him loose, and then he'd go around and touch other people in the queue. And he had sticky fingers, so they didn't like being touched with sticky fingers. So they'd look at the father, and he'd feel uncomfortable, and he'd hold the son. And the moment he did, the son would start crying. So just an uncomfortable situation. Then the mother came. And with this knack that mother seemed to have, she was able to look beyond his behavior and say he's hungry, and she produced food. And there was a remarkable transformation, less than 10 minutes from being a pest. He had become the life and soul of the party, making friends with everyone. And this transformation happened, as I said, very fast. So I suggested to my student that when her boss was throwing a tantrum, he wasn't an ogre who was angry. He was just a overgrown kid throwing a tantrum. She was totally not convinced. And sometime after that, she did something which annoyed him. So he did his usual thing. He planted himself in front of her. He stuck his face in her face. His face got red. He started shouting. Bits of spit started flying out. And it was so apropos what I told her, that this was a kid throwing a tantrum, that she couldn't help it. She burst out laughing. And it was as if she'd smacked him with a wet fish. She doesn't remember what she said, but she does remember that in that instant there was a switch in her head. And instead of seeing him as an intractable ogre whom she had to placate, she saw him simply as an overgrown kid having a tantrum. And the moment there was that switch in her head, something changed in the relationship. He behaved exactly as he did with everyone else, but he never shouted at her again. And 6 months later, she got another job and the situation went off. The point I'm trying to make is, first of all, when you let a toxic person affect your well being, you're handing the keys to your happiness over to someone who's probably a total jerk. Why ever would you want to do that? The first step in not doing that is to recognize that this, in fact, is what you're doing. If you let that person determine how you feel, then you're handing the keys of your well being over to that person, and you don't have to do that. And the second thing is, once you become anchored in your world, and I show how you do that in the program, then all of a sudden you have as much or more influence on the other person as he or she does on you. And when you do that, you will find, no, I am not going to let that person drag me into their emotional domain. I am going to remain in my emotional domain. And guess what? They are going to want to join me because it's so much more fun being where I am and where they are. And I suspect you're seeing that play out in your professional life, Alan.
Right. Now, how do I control my temper and how do I keep from being the ogre when I lose my temper?
Well, the first thing is to be aware. You become an ogre because your mental chatter is dragging you to places where you don't want to go. Mental chatter is that internal monologue that we have going on in our head all the time, and it pretty much runs our life. We have spent our entire life letting our mental chatter run our life, and it frequently takes us to places we don't want to go. So, in my program, you learn how to systematically observe it and find out where it is taking you, and then decide, no, I'm not going to this place because I don't want to spend time there. And when you know that, and it's a conscious process, you can kind of direct it to places where you do want to go. This makes a huge difference in your life. It brings more joy into your life, and it makes you much more effective. You're not thinking about making more money, but the vibrations you send out are such that people are attracted to you. And guess what? They're willing to pay money because they want to be where you are.
Right. Tell us a little bit more about the mental chatter, Srikumar, because I know you've mentioned it before. There may be some people on this call who really are not familiar with what it is and how it works.
Oh, mental chatter, Alan, is the internal monologue that we have going on in our head all the time. It begins when we get up in the morning, is with us right through the day, is always been a part of our life. It's the kind of thing that says, what do I have to do? Oh my God, there's so much work to do. I had a coaching client earlier today. And in fact, this is the client that you recommended to me, Alan. And, she was telling me, I have so many reports to get done. I have 400 reports to get done. I don't have enough time to do it. I'm feeling so overwhelmed. What? And I told her, hey, all of this is your mental chatter. And the way you deal with 400 reports is you don't think about 400 reports. You simply think about, this is the report I'm working on now, and I'm going to put all of my mental energy, all of my emotional energy into this one report. And I'm going to get it done. And when I've got it done, I'm going to think about the next one. And I'm never, ever going to think about the 400 that I have to do. I'm only going to think about, this is the one I'm working on. And this is just one example, but I have several examples of how you can, first of all, recognize that you have mental chatter and how much of a problem it is creating in your life. In fact, I'll go further. The vast majority of all the problems that are plaguing you right now can be traced back to defective mental chatter. And how do you start getting hold with that? And I have several very powerful techniques that I have developed and refined. And I borrowed these from the world's greatest masters. So they have millennia of record of success in various cultures with various people in various circumstances. They absolutely work, Alan.
So we go back to finding that most people have little quirks or little misconceptions.
Mhm.
For example, you mentioned earlier in this conversation, well, just delegate those things. Don't do all those things that you don't like to do anymore, then you won't have to work as hard. Yet
Mhm.
so many of us think, well, I can't give this piece of work away, or it won't get done right, or I want to be in control, or I can't afford a secretary, even though I can't afford not to have a secretary. So, where do we track that mental chatter back to help us find these limiting beliefs so that we can understand where where we sit as a person with misconceptions?
That's actually one of the very first exercises and assignments in my program, and it's a keystone one, where you actually start observing your mental chatter and documenting where it takes you. And from that, it's a short step to what is the impact it's having on your life and what is the emotional domain in which it is putting you. Once you start becoming aware of that, the very common reaction is, oh my God, I never realized that I have this demon running my life and how much it is literally screwing up my life. And from there, you take the first step and the next step and the step after that. It's both an enthralling and thrilling prospect and something which frees you up to a greater extent than you ever have. If you read the Arabian Nights, you remember the story of Sinbad, who had 7 voyages. And in one of the voyages, he meets the old man of the sea, who basically sits on his shoulder and will not get off. And eventually, Sinbad figures out how to dislodge him. And when he dislodges him, there is such a feeling of relief. That's the feeling of relief you get when you recognize that mental chatter has been tyrannizing you your entire life, and you don't have to let it.
Yeah, I remember when I first signed up and meeting you on a weekend when you explained how the mental chatter worked and how the mental models worked, and how I came back a month later and met with the people in the group, and everybody's biggest problem was no longer their biggest problem.
Exactly, yes.
Right. They just decided it wasn't a problem anymore. The toxic boss, the toxic spouse, the monetary issues, they just came back and said, well, I just decided it wasn't a problem. What did you do to solve it? I didn't do anything to solve it. I just decided it's not a problem anymore. It doesn't bother me anymore. Very interesting.
Exactly correct, Alan.
Srikumar, let's talk about something else that you do a great job of teaching, and that is how to have a deep, meaningful relationship as opposed to a superficial relationship. Because one of the things I observed in your program is that I made a lot of good friends, and I had discussions with these friends about things that I could never have imagined talking to other people about. Mm-hmm. And how does that work? And how does a mastermind group work? What's different about a mastermind group?
The reason that happens, Alan, is that every one of us puts up a mask when we're meeting someone. And this mask basically is, here is how I would like this person to see me. And we don't recognize how much energy is involved in putting up that mask and maintaining that mask. What happens in my program, because we start with doing the personal essays before you meet anyone for the first time, is you start putting this mask down. You no longer try to erect a mask, and you're okay there as the authentic you, a human being with all of your flaws and quirks and idiosyncrasies, and that's okay because everybody else has theirs too. And they accept your flaws and idiosyncrasies. It's just that. And when you do that, there is, first of all, a tremendous feeling of relief. All of the energy that you spend or waste in putting up that mask and maintaining it go away. And second, because you no longer have a mask and the others have put down their mask too, there is a feeling of closeness, of community, which is very deep. You experienced it, and everyone who takes my program experiences it, but that is where it all starts. You don't form a close relationship by wanting to form a close relationship. You form a close relationship by being willing to put your mask down and encouraging others to put their mask down. So underneath that, you meet not as lawyer and client, not as donor and supplicant, but you just meet people as one human being to another. And that makes a huge difference. And I can only describe it, but you'll really only understand it when you experience it yourself, as you did, Alan, when you talk about the closeness you had with the persons in your cohort.
Right. And now in a client meeting or a meeting with a colleague, I'm able to be myself and finding that they're much more likely to open up to me and to be themselves when they see that as a genuine trait.
Exactly, because you're sending out a different level of vibration, and that's the vibration that's being picked up, and that's the vibration that they're responding to. And at least some of them will say, gee, I like this. This is where I want to be. And I don't have to tell you that that's a great way to get someone to become your client without ever actively soliciting them.
Right. Now, a lot of my colleagues and even me will have stage fright. Have a little bit of concern or nervousness about speaking to groups of people. And you've had some great words of wisdom on this. and I'm interested in when you talk about have it come from the heart, not necessarily from the mind, and to view yourself as simply that the message is being conducted from you through you. Can you tell us how that works?
Oh, absolutely. And talking about stage fright, let me share an example for you with you. So when my book came out, the publisher decided that they had the rights. They wanted to come up with an audiobook version of that. And they said, rather than hire a professional speaker, professional or, narrator, why don't you simply do it? So I said, fine, but I have a problem. And the problem is that I'm going to be in London since I'm teaching in London Business School. They said, that's no problem. We'll simply hire a studio in London. So I said, fine. So they got a producer, and the producer was an honest to goodness BBC producer who was a dame. She was an honest to goodness dame. She had that title. And she was very precise and articulate in her speech. And I was sitting in a sound room with a mesh between my mouth and the microphone so that waves of my speaking would not disturb the microphone. That's how sensitive the equipment was. And I started reading. And she would come back to me and say, Srikumar, not that way. Can we try it this way? Srikumar, let's try it in this manner. And I became painfully aware how many words I mispronounced, how many times I put the syllabus on the wrong accent, and my face was red. And I swore I am never going to speak again until after I've had 6 months of elocution training and so on. And then I realized something. People don't care how I speak. They don't care if I put the accent or the wrong syllable. They're simply thinking about, is what this guy say, does what this guy say have any value to me? And if it is, then they cut me a lot of slack. And if it isn't, I shouldn't be speaking to them in the first place at all. And if I mispronounce a word so egregiously that they burst out laughing, hey, I brought some laughter into their life, and that's a fantastic thing to do. So I took that attitude. Every time you're bothered about stage fright, you're really saying, what do they think of me? And you're bothered about yourself. What will they think of me? They won't think of you. Focus instead on, do I have a message that will really help them in some significant manner? And if that's what you focus on, I do have a message, it will help them. What is the best way in which I can communicate this message? And that's what you focus your attention on. Stage fright goes away. And it doesn't matter if you make a rollicking fool of yourself, they will laugh with you, not at you, and then you'll go on to business.
Right, right. So one of the great pieces of advice you've also given me in this area is to be the actor on the stage and not the director. Mm-hmm. Can you go ahead and explain that for the viewers?
Oh, absolutely. Let me explain that with an example. So let's say, Alan, that I decided I'm going to come up with a new film version of Death of a Salesman. And guess what? I've picked you to be Willy Loman. Now, if you read Death of a Salesman and you know about Willy Loman, he was extraordinarily successful, and then his career started going down, his marriage disintegrated, and all kinds of things went wrong with his life. He tried to commit suicide, and he failed. So even in failure, even in that, he was not a success. His life just starts unraveling. So you put yourself as Willy Loman, and you really want to experience what Willy Loman did, because that's how you can convey that to the audience. But even while you are experiencing everything that Willy Loman did so you can portray him better on screen, in the back of your mind is the notion, gee, if I do a really good job of this, maybe there's an Oscar in it for me. That's wonderful. You are going through everything the character experiences, but you're identifying with the actor. So that's where I put it very pithily, Alan. If you identify with the actor, you're gold. If you identify with the character, you're screwed. All the time when you go through in your professional life, you're playing a role. I'm an estate attorney, I'm a tax attorney, here are all the things that I'm doing. And that's beautiful. You put yourself into it with full gusto, but you're really playing a role. Who are you behind that? That's something we get into my program, and it's a little too complex to discuss in a a brief webinar like this one, but when you identify with who you are, the actor, and not with the character, your life unfolds smoothly and brilliantly as if by magic.
Right, which goes to your TED Talk theme, and anyone who hasn't seen your TED Talk should certainly see it.
Mm-hmm.
But that it's more about the journey and less about the goal.
Exactly correct.
And that methodology, if it's more about the journey and doing what you're supposed to do on the journey, then you're much more likely to actually reach and exceed the goal than if it's all about the goal.
Absolutely. Isn't that paradoxical? You want to make more money, but you forget about making more money and simply start doing what you can to serve your clients and have the particular emotional domain that I show you how to occupy. And when you do that, you really don't care whether you make money or not. And when you don't, you actually make a heck of a lot more than you ever thought possible. It's paradoxical, but that's exactly the way it is. It's like this, Alan. If you're in a negotiation, you're never in a stronger position in a negotiation than when you're genuinely prepared to walk away, right?
Right.
Works
Absolutely.
exactly the same way in life. You got a goal and you try your level best to achieve the goal and you try your darndest. And if you do, fantastic. If you don't, fantastic. Because here's the mistake most of us make, Alan. We think that the benefit of setting a high goal and trying your level best to achieve the goal is achieving the goal. Wrong. The benefit of setting a goal and trying your level best to achieve the goal is the learning and growth that happen in you and to you as you try your level best to achieve the goal. If you actually achieve the goal, fantastic. If you don't achieve the goal, the learning and growth have already happened, so you're ahead of the game. But the funny thing is, the more you take that attitude and the more it really doesn't matter whether you reach the goal or not, the likelier it is that you will get to your goal. That's a paradox, but that's the way it works.
Talk about your concept of being bigger than the problem.
A lot of the time, Alan, we get completely overwhelmed by something that happens. I'm running a business and oh my God, my clients have left. My employees are rebelling. I am so overworked and stressed out. And you put your hands over your head and you're ready to throw it all up. You are not really facing insurmountable problems. You are becoming smaller than the problem. You're allowing something that's happened outside overwhelm you. And the first thing you have to decide is, I can be bigger than the problem. I am not going to let this down. And when you decide that you're not going to let this down, and this is a shift that you make between your ears, it doesn't happen outside, it happens between your ears. And when you decide I'm going to be bigger than the problem, this is just something I can handle. Countless people have handled many more or more difficult circumstances than I have. And there will be others even bigger in my life, and I can cope with them. Let me suggest something to you. If you look at the entire history of mankind, probably you'll have a tough time imagining someone who had more riding on his shoulders than Dwight David Eisenhower on the eve of D-Day. Think about it. Thousands of vessels were ready to set sail from England to Normandy. Tens of thousands of paratroopers were waiting to get into their planes and jump out. Millions of people were geared to land against an implacably entrenched foe in weeks. Very literally, the fate of the world depended on the decisions that he made. So one would expect that he would be living a very tense, troubled time. On the contrary, he slept like a baby. And as he explained later, I hired the very best meteorologists I could, and they gave me the best weather forecast that they were capable of coming up with. I selected sector commanders. They were all generals. They were as competent as I could find, and they made their preparations. And having done everything I could, there was nothing more to do, so I went to bed and I slept. That's exactly how it works out.
one of the things I've learned from you is the importance of daily gratitude. And some people really don't understand what gratitude means or what they can do to have the gratitude in their life. What are your thoughts on that? What do you tell people in your program? Because I know it has a profound impact on them.
I basically point out to them that what they do, what virtually everybody does, is that we spend a disproportionate amount of our emotional energy on the two, three, or four things that are wrong in our lives. More precisely, on the two, three, or four things that we have arbitrarily decided is wrong in our life. And we completely ignore the 40, 50, 60, 200 things that are pretty damn good about our lives. Everybody on this webcast or webinar, Alan, is incredibly privileged. They don't have to bother about whether they have a roof over their head, whether they're going to have lunch tomorrow, whether they can go from place A to place B with reasonable certainty that they're not going to get blown up. And any of these, as you know, is a big deal in a big chunk of the world outside. But when I point this out, they all say, yes, yes, I am very privileged, but they don't feel privileged. They feel put upon and stressed out and anxious. And the reason for that is, where do they put their awareness on? Your awareness, Alan, is like a flashlight. It's going to illuminate whatever you shine it on. You shine it on a problem and it'll illuminate the problem and make it big. But if you shine it on the many, many ways in which you're blessed, that's what it's going to illuminate, and a feeling of gratitude is going to come up to you. So what I advocate is, yeah, you think there are things wrong in your life and you want to fix them, by all means do fix them. But what is important is the space, the emotional domain that you are occupying as you try to fix them. And it's much better for you to be in the emotional domain of appreciation, gratitude, where you recognize there's so much that's fantastic about your life. And yeah, there are a couple of things that you would rather were some other way, and you try to make it the other way, but you do it from a space where you're enormously grateful for the many, many, many good things in your life. And the advantage, Alan, of being in a domain of appreciation, gratitude, and that's what I would wish for everyone listening to this, is when you're occupying the emotional domain of appreciation, gratitude, you're not stressed out, you're not angry, you're not dejected, you're not overwhelmed. Those emotions cannot coexist with appreciation and gratitude.
Oh, that's beautiful. Srikumar, on a more practical question, I was talking with Elizabeth Sperling yesterday. She's one of your teacher assistants.
Correct.
And she was explaining to me that people who take your programs get support from her. Can you explain how that works and
Absolutely.
why it's a positive and why it's maybe even essential for a lot of people?
Yeah. What is important, Alan, and the reason my program works is I outline the concepts, and I've outlined several concepts in very brief in the time that we've spent together, and they understand it. But between understanding it and implementing it in their life, there is a big difference. Most persons say, yes, yes, that is very important, and I should do it. But then they go back and life gets in the way and they don't do what they should be doing. And therefore, the benefit in their life is very little. When you take my program, not only do you get these concepts, which I outline so that you completely understand them, but then also give you individual and group assignments and exercises, whereby you go do it and see how it works in your life, and you're accountable both to yourself and to the members of your cohort. And Elizabeth is my general patient teacher who will prod you. Hey, Alan, you said that you would get this done. Where are you? Okay, I understand life got in the way, so you can't do it by Saturday, but can you possibly get in by next Wednesday? And why not? When you have someone who's gently prodding you, when you have someone who is with you on the journey, can explain to you where the sticky points are and help you get over the bumps, you find you get so much more out of it. That's why the program works.
Yeah, she also told me she has some very deep conversations quite often.
Yeah.
To help people with their
absolutely, yes. That's one of
situations.
the things that persons will discover if they sign up for the program, which is they will form relationships with a level of depth that they never expected. In fact, I have a challenge question for persons who listen to this. When is the last time you had a really deep, significant, meaningful conversation with anyone? And a surprising number can't even recall the last time they had a deep, meaningful conversation with anyone.
People, you told me that people forget or never knew that a big meaning of a relationship is that you're going on a journey together.
Correct.
So you would view your spouse as your housekeeper or your maintainer or someone you fight with or your sexual conquest, when in reality, this person is on the journey with you. And you're
Exactly.
helping them with their journey and they're helping you with your journey.
Exactly correct.
That's meant a lot.
And actually, I would go further than that, Alan. Every person who comes into your life, every situation that you're confronted with is an ability for you to work on yourself. The only thing you ever do in life is you work on yourself. And all of the people in your life, your wife, your children, your secretary, your clients, they are tools given to you by a benevolent universe to help you work on yourself. You'll be the best damn estate and tax attorney you can be, but in the process of trying to be the best damn estate and tax attorney you can be, what you're really doing is you're working on yourself. And when you approach life in that and recognize that every situation, whether you like it or whether you don't like it, is just a tool given to you so that you can work on yourself. And if you have that consciously, it'll make a huge difference in your life.
Beautiful. Srikumar, is there anything else you'd like to mention? This has been a
No,
really
I think
good
that you have asked
presentation.
me very good questions, and I think that certainly gives them a very good flavor of what can happen. The only other thing I would like to add is that changes happen in your life that you would not even have dreamed possible. Stress and anxiety very largely leave your life. You find that you're much more effective and efficient in what you do. You find that joy comes into your life. You go through days and you can almost go down to your knees in involuntary gratitude of the tremendous good fortune that has been bestowed on you. Things happen miraculously. Now, this is something I'm stating. Perhaps you can testify to it from your personal experience. So the real question is not, should I enroll for this program? But seriously, can I afford not to? How much more of my life do I want to continue being bogged down and anxious? That's a question to ask yourself. And I will make a statement. Anybody who takes my program and sincerely and conscientiously does the exercises doesn't have to believe anything, but sincerely and conscientiously does the exercises, their lives will change significantly for the better. No ifs, ands, or buts. Take the program, do the exercises, their life will change significantly for the better. The only way you can go through my program and not have your life changed is if you don't do the exercises. And that is not an option because Elizabeth is going to help you, hold you accountable, and keep prodding you. And even if you do a half-hearted stab at that, you'll find changes happening in your life.
So a lot of people have read your book, Are You Ready to Succeed? And I know a lot of people have changed their lives just using the procedures on that book without help.
Yeah.
You also have a web-based program that Elizabeth's involved
Correct.
with, where people
Yes.
can do this web-based. But a live program will certainly be the most effective for people who can afford it.
That's absolutely correct. It's a live program is much more intense, and the lessons get imprinted to a much greater extent. And in fact, many people have gone through the online program and said, this stuff is so good that I want to do the live program. And then they came back and did the live program.
Right, right. Well, Srikumar, I can't thank you enough for having come up with your program. Your protocols are amazing. The results are amazing. The friendships and success I've had as a result of embracing the book and the program have been great. So I'm looking forward to helping you share this with other people as we go through our journeys together.
Absolutely. And we've been talking about working together for a long time, Alan. I'm very, very glad that the bus is finally leaving the station.
Absolutely. All
You have
right.
a terrific day, Alan, and I am looking forward with eager anticipation to the next step and where we go from here.
Wonderful. Have a great day.